As India urbanizes rapidly, cities have emerged as major contributors to climate change. Climate action plans, or CAPs as they are known, can help mitigate these impacts by reducing emissions and enhancing resilience. Mumbai and Chennai already have CAPs in place, and Bengaluru's is in the process of being developed. Our next session, a very crucial one indeed, a panel discussion, aims to critically examine the effectiveness of climate action plans adopted by city administrations. I would like to now invite Kavitha Muralidharan to moderate the panel. The panel, Climate Commitments Plan to Action. Kavitha Muralidharan is a journalist, translator, and author from Tamil Nadu with 25 plus years of experience. Her work highlights gender, marginalization, and grassroots activism. Her latest Tamil book, Tulip Malargalin Kadaigal, I hope I've got that right. The Stories of Tulips showcases her commitment to environmental justice, particularly focusing on the role of women in environmental protests. She is also associated with Poovulagin Nanbargal, where she focuses on intersections of climate change and gender. I would also request Kavitha to introduce our panelists for this session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shruti, and thanks. I'm very grateful to Citizen Matters for bringing together such a very important, momentous discussion. So, as Shruti pointed out, CAP or Climate Action Plan it's very critical considering how devastating climate change has become in the last few years. But also, has it been meaningfully implemented both in Chennai and elsewhere? Like in Chennai, I know we have a proper plan. We've very recently, like last week, we had a climate change summit by the state government. So there are discussions happening around, but whether these discussions translate into meaningful actions is what I plan to kind of delve into in this panel. I think I'll first introduce all the panelists and call them over. So Kanchi Kohli, she doesn't need introduction. Thank you so much. That was a brilliant speech. I think you kind of set the tone for the discussion too today. Please, Kanchi Kohli, but still, yeah. Kanchi Kohli is a researcher, educator, and communicator of environmental law and policy. Her work areas cover the fields of environment, forest, and biodiversity regulation and governance in India. Her policy, research, and practice explores links and gaps between law and development, sustainability, and environmental justice. Kanchi has authored several reports, research papers, and popular articles as part of her work. She has also co-edited several books and is associate editor of the quarterly magazine Current Conservation. Kanchi teaches environmental law and development courses at government training institutes and universities. She was selected to the International Visitors Leadership Program of the US government in 2012. Our next panelist is Jaya, the Executive Program Director at WRI India, Sustainable Cities and leads Urban Development and Resilience Initiatives. With over 20 years of experience in sustainable development, she integrates data-driven solutions into policy. Previously, she worked on urban planning and projects in India and the US, specializing in infrastructure, compact growth policies, and climate resilience strategies. Vetri Selvan is my colleague at Poovulagin Nanbargal. He's also an advocate since 2004. He's been practicing in Madras High Court for 20 years. He holds a master's degree in intellectual property rights. He specializes in public interest litigations and environmental cases. As a member of Poovulagin Nanbargal, he advocates for environmental justice, awareness, and climate literacy. He's worked on cases involving GM brinjal, nuclear plants, and hydrocarbons, while also engaging in media debates on environmental issues. And last, but of course not the least, panelist Rajendran Prabhakar is a social activist and trustee at Maarga. He works on social justice for urban deprived slum communities. His work focuses on education and empowerment of children and women. He's a trustee of Maarga, a community NGO. He's previously worked with Child Rights and You. He has vast experience in grassroots people movement with clear inclination towards the most marginalized communities like SC, ST, OBC and minority communities. Thank you so much. I will now go into the questions. I think I'll start with Jaya, Dhindaw, because you were involved in CAP for the Bangalore, right? So I just wanted to understand, it's a very ambitious goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and address the urban heat island effect. Considering the trade-off between green ambitions and urban realities, especially in rapidly expanding areas, how does this CAP especially tackle the urban heat island effect in vulnerable neighborhoods? What critical gaps do you think need attention?
Thank you, Kavitha, and thank you, Citizen Matters, for hosting such an important dialogue on climate here. The host was actually mentioning that Bangalore's climate action is underway. I want to say that's partially correct and partially incorrect, because the plan itself was completed and has been adopted by the city's civic authority, the BBMP, in 2023, in November 2023, right? So it's been over a year now. Actually, the Climate Action Cell has also been set up to sort of coordinate activities around climate action in the city. But I'll tell you why it's also sort of partially correct, is because it is a living document. It is meant to sort of respond to things as things change. It's meant to respond to local realities at ward level and so on and so forth. And that implementation part is yet to be done. So yes, it's done, but it's not done. Coming to your question on heat, really, and what the BCAP said, and urban heat island. So urban heat island, I mean, technically there are many ways to measure it. So you can look at air temperature, you can look at land surface temperature, combination of the both, so on and so forth. But the way the BCAP looked at this was through satellite imagery and so land surface temperature. And what we found really is that in Bangalore, the peripheral areas, right, when you look at land surface temperature, are the ones which are basically more heated, have more urban heat islands, and will continue to experience greater impacts of heat. Reason for that is because urban, when you look at land surface temperature, it is a factor of things, the conditions on the land, right? So it means what is the level of concretization, how much permeability is there, whether, blue-green infrastructure exists or not. And clearly in our city, the peripheral areas don't have any of this. We have kind of lost a great deal of our blue-green infrastructure because about 120% of our new development has gone into those areas when you look at those areas. And also, a lot of that area has been concretized, and so the urban heat island effects is felt most over there. Now, what the BCAP does is it creates this sort of baseline information to then be able to act on it. Because what is also happening is when you look at two things, one is the people who are living in these peripheral areas, experiencing greater heat and impacts of heat, etc. Last year, just in March, Bangalore's temperature was like 36. It was, it was one of the highest. And that has not been the case. And, these people were experiencing the heat. And then there's the differential vulnerability context, where when you look at informal workers, construction workers, waste workers, they are the ones who are working outside, gig workers, they are working outside, outdoors the whole time, and they are the ones who are the most exposed to these kind of climate hazards. And it has health implications, it has livelihood implications, because, you fall sick, you're out, and, for a couple of weeks, it impacts the entire livelihood of your family. Unfortunately, the peripheral areas of the city are also the parts where a lot of the climate migrants from other places have come, right? And it's kind of ironic because they have come to escape sort of the climate situations in their states, their places, and, the kind of things that have led to maybe drought-like conditions or ways in which, their agricultural livelihoods were no longer tenable. And then they come and then they end up living in these peripheral areas in Bangalore, which is disconnected from basic services, which have these higher exposure to heat, floods, localized, all kinds of things happening. There's a great report by Jan Sahas which outlines, what is happening with climate migrants, and that is actually worth examining. But in terms of solutions, what does the BCAP recommend? So BCAP recommends several things in every sector. So BCAP has different sectors on energy, transport, waste, urban planning, greening, biodiversity, and so on, and disaster management. And there are recommendations in every chapter on heat, on sort of climate vulnerability and how that can be addressed, right from looking at, from a disaster standpoint, looking at shelters, where people can be capacitated to deal with other people who are experiencing, these impacts of heat on their health or their livelihoods, down to basically mainstreaming nature-based solutions in the city, so restoring the city's blue-green infrastructure, which has been heavily built up upon, and how do you restore those connections, to restoring sort of the green canopy and permeability, right? Because permeability also has a role to play in how you manage heat, how you manage floods, water incidences. So it talks about basically how do you increase the tree cover. So by 2030, the goal is to, have 10% more tree cover than the baseline. By 2040, so on and so forth. And also just, permeability, building materials, it talks about, low carbon passive architecture, building materials which are heat resistant, especially the roofing materials, wall materials. So there are basically, there are recommendations in each section, but I would say what is most important really is the nature-based solutions and reestablishing the blue-green networks. The gaps that remain, I would say really two things. One is that heat waves, unfortunately, were not notified as a disaster by the NDMA last year, right? It's one of the things which was not notified because basically what you can't measure doesn't get highlighted. We have not been able to measure the impacts of heat at all very well. Whether it comes to health impacts, if someone has a heart attack because they're exposed outside during high heat temperatures, when they go to the hospital, it is not recorded as something that was attributed to heat. It is recorded as a heart attack. And so, you don't really get the actual measurements. And when you don't get the measurements, and when you see the newspapers from last year, it said, in India, there were deaths, some in like 300-400 people died, in the heat waves. And similarly, if you looked at Europe, it was like 20,000 deaths. And it was like, how is that? I mean, instinctively, we know that can't be the case. So one is it doesn't get measured, and so nationally it has been sort of not notified, which is of concern, but because it means that during emergency conditions, the protocols which are supposed to kick in for climate hazards don't. So the first thing we can do is at the state level, notify heat as a climate hazard, right? Tamil Nadu did it recently, and so we need to first do that. The second is you have to bring money and you have to unlock private financing and bring money to the problem. So things like, increasing blue-green cover, establishing sort of these shelters, heat-resilient measures that you need in the city, they do require money. How do you unlock private finance in addition to converging it with government schemes that already exist and the gardens department, budgets and so on and so forth is something that we really need to work on. And apart from that, the last thing is basically these ward-level heat action plans, which will become the need, although we're sitting in Bangalore and, we have some of the most beautiful weather in the country, but this is not going to remain the case, and we really need to plan for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jaya. I think it was very exhaustive, but I'll still come back to you for more questions. I'll move to Mr. Rajendra Prasad. I wanted to ask him, sir, whenever there is a disaster, and there are many disasters happening now, so like the most affected are the most vulnerable communities, women, the marginalized, but their voices are not heard when it comes to planning about or seeking solutions about climate change. What do you think are the systematic barriers that keep them away from being included into meaningful climate action?
First of all, I want to thank Citizens Matters to bring me here, and it's the first of its kind. I think that at least one or two people from the intersectionality, people who can speak on the different views, are being also invited. I thank Citizens Matters for that. So, first of all, our entire idea of climate change in the city is very exclusive in its nature, because 35% of our city is living in slums or one-room accommodations. 35% of a large city like Bangalore are living in slums, and we just set them aloof and leave them out of our climate action plan or our climate imagination, the idea of climate change. All that looks very funny. How can that be possible? So I want to definitely insist that their viewpoints and their involvement and leadership is very critical and essential to evolve any meaningful action plan for a city in terms of climate action plans. So, slums are nothing but the expression of caste in a city. Earlier, I used to believe that it is a finance, development finance, that was making the slums existing in these big cities. But later I understood it is the caste in governance that has made sustained slums in any city. The caste in governance, the caste in planning, the caste exclusionary viewpoints, politics. When you plan a city or you involve them in the meaningful activities. See, the concerns are very open that we used to seem to look at, keep the idea of property and development in the showcase and discuss the climate action plan outside of it. So at least of now, there are 2.5 lakh built houses ready for sale in Bangalore. 2.5 lakhs of houses or flats ready for sale, but it is vacant for years after year, nobody to buy. But then you keep on, if you see Bangalore at a scale, that the construction is on and on and on, and no cap imposed on it. So the idea of happiness, the idea of comfort, the idea of property and future sustainable thing for the class, so they're all kept aloof, okay, they are kept outside. And we are discussing about climate action plan. How that is possible? So it is not possible. So there are two things. One is that this idea of property, idea of economic growth, development. On the other side, there's an exclusion of 35% of the people kept outside the idea of climate action plan. So these are the two things. So naturally, any havoc, any accidents, any negative impacts of this development, only the vulnerable communities will be the first to get affected, and especially the women and the children. So it is natural. So it is actually part of the policy, the idea of development that any government, whichever party is in power, the idea they are pursuing in terms of development, in terms of concessions to the corporates to build and build and build, and keep all the lifestyle will not be disturbed. The comforts will not be disturbed. The property, idea of property for future. I have 3 flats, I have 4 houses, I have 6 houses. That will not change. That will be a constant thing. And the development will go on and on and on. And we'll be discussing secretly within 4 walls about our climate action plan. So this looks very tricky, and I don't think this will be sustainable.
Illuminating, I should say. So I will come back to you, but I'll ask Vetri, because I think Chennai, we work a lot in Chennai, and we know every December we kind of dread what's going to happen this time. Is it going to be a flood? Is it going to be a cyclone or a tsunami? One December we had tsunami, and we still kind of remember it. So, Chennai is becoming very prone to climate events. So as a lawyer and as an activist, I wanted to understand from Vetri. He's also been involved with CAP in Chennai. I mean, he's closely studied it. So what do you think, Vetri? Does it really translate into action, or is it symbolic? How do we kind of consider the real world impact of such plans?
So first, good morning to all, and thanks for the invite. Basically the action plan is supposed to be a scientific document. It has to guide the state to how to tackle climate change. So that is the idea of a climate action plan. Unfortunately, we don't have such an action plan anywhere in the country. not at the national level, nor at the state level, nor at the district level, nor at the city level. See, the action plan is nothing but whether it is supposed to be Bangalore action plan or Chennai national action plan or state action plan. It's a collection of existing schemes. All it talks about is that these are the existing schemes and it will be implemented with regard to the environmental factors. I will give you one example. For example, our state climate action plan, which is a very outdated one. It was released in the year 2014. And they have updated recent times, and the central government, they have sent it for the clearance for the approval for the central government. So it is yet to be get it clearance, new updated one. So the 2014 climate action plan talks about the little bit of science is there. It talks about 4 parameters of the existing temperature rise and what the future rise in the temperature will be. And the second part is with regard to the rainfall. And the third part is with regard to the agriculture changes. And fourth is water. These are the 4 parameters which has been taken into account. All its health aspect has been neglected. And other aspects, we have the cyclones and we have the zoonotic disease and you have many other factors. Even lightning is happening because of climate change. Impact is happening more and more of it. So this kind of things has been left out. So it's an unscientific, I will say it's a little bit of science. So that's the major flaw we have. And the second aspect is as per the vulnerability aspect, whether any vulnerability assessment on the marginalized community has been done. You have the data with regard to the district level vulnerability assessment. You don't have the data with regarding to the marginalized communities or other any particular community which is going to affect because of climate change and other impacts, other disasters. That kind of exclusive studies has not been done and added in the existing action plan. Even in the latest Chennai climate action plan, you have some data with regarding to the rise of temperature in the slum areas, and as my friend was mentioning about that. There is a particular study. And the solution they have given is that they must be shifted over or they must be evacuated from them. So that is the only solution. So there is no proper mitigative or adaptive steps which has been recommended in the existing action plan. Now, how can we say this is a scientific document? If it's going to be a scientific document, that has to give ideas and that has to mandate the state to what action has to be taken to tackle climate impact. But that is not the case so. It acts in a reverse manner. What are all the policies the government has, that are all included in the action plan. So that is the major flaw. Even in Tamil Nadu, we have many policy data and policies with regarding to climate change. You have the state governing council under the chief minister for climate change. You have the district climate committees. You have the climate mission. You have the wetland mission. You have the green mission. But all these are happening within the Department of Environment. They have nothing to do with the Department of Industry or Department of Electricity. Unless or otherwise this department comes together and act together, you will not be able to achieve combating climate change impacts. So that's the major flaws. So what I would suggest or I would say is that we need more number of signs. For example, recent Wayanad and Tamil Nadu, the early warning system from the union government, that became another political issue. How far the action plan is independent and how far a state can do its own analysis in the scientific capacity. Because the union government has the Minister of Earth Science, they have the Science and Technology Department, they have all the science and technology, they have the ISRO and everything. So the early warning system and the analysis part of science mostly depend on the union government. But whether union government is doing adequate research on the early warning systems, whether they are doing adequate research on the welfare science with regarding to combating climate change, and whether they are sharing adequate number of informations and enough information with regarding to tackling climate to the state government, whether they have increased the national missions on climate change. Still now we have about 8 to 12 climate action plans at the national level, which was formed in the year 2010 when Jaya was the Minister of Environment. After that, we don't have any new numbers of climate mission. So that is what's happening at the union level. Unless or otherwise, the union government is taking more steps, the state government cannot record because the state government depends on scientific data from the union government. So that's the another plan. We do have a climate studio in the Anna University in our capital city. But that's the technology, that's the institution which is at the very initial stage, and they're doing preliminary works under. So we need more number of science and early warning systems. And the analysis part and the vulnerability assessment, we need more number of, unless or otherwise we are getting more number of analysis on the vulnerability assessment data, we cannot have a proper scientific data on the climate action plan. So what I would say is the present action plans are not a complete scientific documents, and the present systems is not enough. We have to do more on this aspect, and so there is a really a largest gap is there.
So Kanchi, we just heard Vetri tell how CAP falls short on several counts. So there is this weak enforcement and gaps in the governance. What do you think are the structural flaws that kind of undermine effectiveness of CAP across the country at district level, state level? And what do you think needs to be done in terms of reforms to actually make sure that these commitments are on paper are translated into meaningful actions?
Just have to disappear. Okay. So, no, all three people, I think, all of you who've spoken before me, I think, have very fundamentally laid out a whole set of problems that are very much part of the entire discourse today. And I think I just want to, bring out a question to reflect for all of us who are involved in the climate discourse. I think, see, one of the things, and we do it all the time. I mean, it's a matter of, it's such a challenge of trying to address a problem in the now, alongside knowing that this problem is, it's going to hit a roadblock because you're aware of some sort of structural problems that the society is made of. Now, one of the things, and I think a reflection for climate actors, I think is important for us, and I'll think about it in two ways. One is the moment we technicalize a problem for ourselves, we try and simplify a problem for ourselves, whether it is for the purposes of awareness, or it is for the purpose of designing solutions. It may appear like, okay, this seems to be manageable as a problem. So I'm able to design solutions or deploy solutions to be able to address it. And we have done it in the climate discourse. It shows also from it shows the comfort level of the actors in the climate discourse. We actually are very shy of dealing with serious structural problems over which the climate solutions have to really, or alongside which climate solutions have to be designed and implemented. So the moment you talk about whether it is a renewable energy project, or you're talking about a blue carbon project, or anything else which is designed like that, it finally goes out in the world where there are those structural differences. So the reason I'm emphasizing in that is that we have to bring, as climate actors, or whether it's policy or justice actors, we have to bring those problems upfront. Because whether it is, after a solution is designed, you hit a roadblock, or you might as well acknowledge that roadblock upfront and say, okay, this is going to happen. We need processes to deal with it upfront so that we don't hit those roadblocks ahead. Now, this is not to say that some of the immediate needs don't need to be addressed. There are climate-induced disasters, everyday weather events. We have to deal with those kinds of things. And I think increasingly, if you see whether it's globally or locally, all the measures which are dealing with what is known as adaptation is gradually reducing. Whereas a lot more attention is on the mitigation side. Why? Because that's where most businesses also land up seeing profits. It is a project worth investing in, you'll get return to investment, all of that things. Whereas the other side is not. You have to actually be out there, creating other kinds of public goods, which may not be return to investment in the financial sense. It will be a return to investment in the social sense. It may be a return to investment in a political sense. But I think those are the kinds of, in some senses, I'm pushing all of us to, I guess, detechnicalize our own mind frame and think of some things that we may want to do immediately to address and relieve all those kinds of things. But I don't think any action plan is going to go very far if we stick with the hypothesis that this is a technical problem and we can resolve it technically. And I think that has to change. Only then I think the structural gaps can even begin to start changing. And I think good processes can really help us far in that.
Actually think we are short of time. Yeah, thanks so much, Kanchi. But I'll have a quick round of questions before we move on to next thing. So I think this is very important. Jaya, the government talks about CAP on the one hand. On the other hand, we have massive infrastructure projects like tunnel road or sky deck. So how do you view this contradiction? Does CAP take into account these the ecological impact of such projects?
So I think two things, right? I mean, one, the CAP is not meant to do that. It's not meant to say that, okay, build a tunnel road or do these elevated, highways and all of that, and let's see what the impact of that is, right? I think what the main purpose of the CAP really was, and we have to understand that in India, the ones which were done for Chennai, which have been done for Mumbai, Bangalore, these are first generation climate action plans. This is the first time that these cities have global standard measurements of what their GHG emissions are, what is their vulnerability profile, who is vulnerable where, and what are the larger sort of things that we can do around this, what is the thinking, right? So just to give you a sense of, on the CAP side, and I'll say this, for the Bangalore one, in which basically, we were involved in that so deeply, we basically consulted 40 plus agencies, right? National, state, city level. For anyone who has worked with the government, you can imagine what working with 40 plus agencies to get data means. Or maybe you can't even imagine what that undertaking is, right? So any sort of, the 0 to 1 journeys are quite difficult. They're quite hard. They're not easy, right? And I think first we have to acknowledge that. The second part is that, what we did with the CAP was to kind of gain a basic level understanding of the city's profile, and then say now local level efforts need to be taken up. This is not the end of the road, right? The CAP is not meant to be this one document which is a magic bullet answer to all of our climate problems. It's not, right? It tells you the problem, really. That's what it's doing. It's surfacing the problem. The solutions still need to be thought about. The solutions need community input, like Sir was saying, what Vetri was saying. It needs community level inputs at the lowest level, at the ward level, at the neighborhood level. That's where we need to action it. So what we need in a Malleshwaram versus what we need, in a Whitefield are going to be very different things, right? And what we need to prioritize. So the whole idea is that how do you go from this whole, sort of meta-level climate action plan and the kind of knowledge and the, the intelligence that it gives you, and convert that intelligence and that insight into actions. And that is where, the current lot of work which the city is doing, especially the climate action cell has been formulated. That's a huge win. Now, the climate action cell for some of these road projects, infrastructure projects, that can play a role to say, hey, these are the, impacts. Let's not do this. Here's an alternative. They're the ones who can hold the, the space to bring different actors, different departments together. It's a very important initiative. I believe we have some climate action cell fellows here today with us, and they'll talk about it. But that's where now action needs to happen.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Prabhakar, so I wanted to ask you, actually when Kanchi was speaking in the inaugural session, she mentioned how we need to flip the gaze from tops-down approach to bottom-up approach. You've worked with marginalized communities. Can you share one experience where involvement of community of people has changed things for better?
Yeah, that's a good question. But then I want to only bring the problems, then immediately give you answers for that question. First of all, the 35% of the Bangalore city or citizens in Bangalore are living in these slums. They are not educated or semi-educated. They are not literates. They are workers, and they are making the city going. So all the work they do is to keep the city going, and they are kept away, kept outside the either the planning or the execution or anything. So that way, the communities needs to be educated, bring awareness, informed, and I believe only the complete involvement of the slum dwellers in Bangalore can bring change in the climate.
Don't have a public consultation process for climate action plans. We do have public consultation process for the metro development projects and other things. But for the climate action plans, we don't have public consultation process. And recently, there was a draft and public opinion was given. So it is the first mode where we are getting consultation from the margins committee. The second aspect is that the action plans doesn't have more legal mandate. It's a guiding principles for each of the government bodies to whether it is for their choice, whether to adapt or not to adapt. You cannot question them, so this is the policy, you have to adapt this. We cannot do that because they don't have a legal mandate, and all these action plans are not notified or under any statutory laws or otherwise. So they're simply guidelines and action plans. So they don't have the legal mandate. As far as the marginalized committee is concerned, we must have legal mandate for the protection of them. So recently, Supreme Court has given a direction, has given an order saying that the right to free from adverse impact of climate change is a fundamental right. To enforce such a fundamental right, the mandates is on the state government to protect all the marginalized community. So they must have special enactments. They must have special laws to protect them. So that's the only possible way we can tackle climate change and the impacts of the marginalized community. For example, in Tamil Nadu is concerned, we have many unorganized sectors. We have many welfare schemes for unorganized sectors. And there are two departments, the labor department and the industrial safety department, which take care of the laborers and other unorganized sectors. But unfortunately, they are the Sugi and other gig workers, they are not covered on any laws. So you don't have a monetary system for such kind of peoples. We have a monetary system for unorganized sectors like construction laborers and other things. You have the labor department. Through the labor department, we can enforce, we can grant them leave, or we can give some welfare measures, and we can ask them not to have work hours during 11 to 3 where the heat wave is more high. We can give early warning system through the labor department. That we can do. But as far as the gig workers and other things, we don't have any laws and any legislation to controlling mechanism. So that's the aspect. These things cannot be included in the climate action plans, as my friend was suggesting that. So that's haven't. So the ultimate solution will be that we must have new number of legislations with regarding to tackling climate change in each and every scenarios. So more number of legislations is necessary. So that in the legislations, we can also have a process where the local people and the marginalized people and the municipalities and the panchayats are taken into account in creating all this kind of action plans and other things.
Thank you, Vetri. So Kanchi, Vetri actually spoke about the need for laws. There are some laws which might help, like coastal regulation zone laws, which can be used to hold the government accountable. How do you think the community should leverage such instruments to demand accountability in terms of climate change or climate justice? The existing laws, perhaps. Is it possible at all?
I mean, there are lots of experiments where once the conversation around these laws has been democratized, where people have been able to understand the potential and limits of environmental laws, understand institutions. Even some of our work, we've tried to do that. I think it has to some extent allowed bridging the enforcement gap. To some extent. For instance, you know how a coastal zone management plan is created. You know exactly who's going to come to map. You know exactly how they are mapping. You're able to speak and rectify it to some extent. That is not to say that some of these laws are the spaces through which that big change is going to come. You can definitely, because there are some structural faults in these laws itself. So I think the legal space can be one of the ways in which some of that mediation can be done. It is definitely not a sufficient space at all. The other thing I think I want to just flag is that we have to make sure that, and I think this is something that we've been thinking of for ourselves, that while an action plan is very critical, it should not necessarily become a distraction from the action that is required. Because the action that is required is already taking place. You already have environmental laws that are shifting and incorporating a certain version of a climate response already. You already have that. There is a global mandate, there is a national mandate. You can see some environmental laws already shifting, or some labor laws already shifting towards that. While many of us are involved in creating a space and a mandate to have governments commit an intent to address this problem. But how do you actually make sure that they're not speaking two completely different languages? Now, a coastal regulation zone process, exactly the same thing is happening, right? You may have some progressive clauses in a law, but in the same space you're talking about blue economy. In the same space you're talking about blue carbon, and there are also people's lives in those spaces. So these parallel processes are we may continue to get engaged with it, but where the change has to happen, it's already happening, even in the legal reform.
Time, so I'm actually skipping certain questions. We are going to throw open the floor for questions from the audience, but before that I wanted to invite the Climate Change Action Cell, all right? The Climate Action Cell of BPMP, they have a fellowship program where young professionals passionate about climate change and civic issues support the activities of the CAC. I invite Climate Program Manager Sharda and fellow Prithvi to talk about the cell.
Good noon. Thank you, ma'am. And thanks for Citizen Matters for this invite. And hello, I'm Sharada, Program Manager for the Bangalore Climate Action Cell, and I'm from Reap Benefit. So regarding the Climate Action Cell, I would like to start it with the Bengaluru Climate Action Plan, the document that which Jaya ma'am was hinting at too. It is a global-facing document, and Bengaluru is the third city in India to have such a global standard framework, and the first city to have a fellowship to the Climate Action Plan. So I would just like to have a timeline of you, so that we had the plan launched by November 2023, and to continue on that, for the implementation part, we had the institution of the Climate Action Cell under the Brihat Bengaluru Mahanagara Palike, the Bengaluru's corporation's purview. That was constituted around February 2024, and we are running since then with the fellows as full-time members from November. So I just like to kind of, have a brief on about how the fellows are constituted. So we have around 4 different roles. We have a senior fellow for the MER, climate budgeting and project preparation activities, and 1 data innovation fellow, and 1 fellow exclusively for the partnership engagement and cell coordination, and one important role that we have is local climate action and civic engagement, and we have 3 fellows for the same role. So this specific role is to indicate the implementation of localization of BCAP, because what we talk is about a global standard and at a very macro level, and we would like this plan to go on ground as a localized unit. So we would like to use this role to implement this one. So the plan is still running, and it is still in its infancy. So and also I would like to ask my fellow Prithvi, senior fellow, he would like to add few points on the climate budgeting activities that we are taking forward.
Good morning all, and thank you for the forum. The Climate Action Plan, actually, we have knowledge partners from WRI and C40, Biome, as well as with the Reap Benefit. We are able to come up with the concise action plan upon how to implement, especially with the climate budgeting, as well as with the monitoring, evaluation and reporting aspect. Also with the project proposals, we get a number of engagements, especially from the NGOs, profit organization, non-profit organization. They want to contribute to the kind of a Bangalore atmosphere, and they want to really, they are concerned about the the issues as well. So they come up with the proposals. We try to look into that, and we have the another fellow who looks into the partner engagement, and with the policy aspect of climate budgeting. What we trying to do is we try to look into the aspect of what is with the government funding. So with the government funding, what are the activities that are being categorized in the concept of, okay, these are the climate based activities. With the existing budget, we are trying to look into the tagging and tracking. Okay, these are the climate activities of the government expenditure. And BBMP being a nodal officer, the nodal agency for the implementation of the BCAP, that is a Bangalore Climate Action Plan, under which we have department coordination, that is for the MER, monitoring, evaluation and reporting. We have around identified 28 departments. We are trying to have a daily interaction and to get the information from what is that BESCOM is doing the activity, and that could actually really help the citizens and their concerns. We have CREDL, we have DULT, and so on henceforth. So apart from the departmental coordination, we are trying to look into the climate budgeting as well. And with the climate budgeting, in India, it is most probably by this December we'll be having India's second climate budget in the cities. First one is with the Mumbai, and the second one would be the Bangalore. And we are on it, and we currently, the process is ongoing with the climate budgeting aspect. We are trying to analyze the expenditure as well as with the budgetary allocation from the government perspective. And with the government perspective, we are able to look into, okay, these are the activities which are looked into the concerns of the climate change. In the panel discussion, I was just counting how many times the climate change word. Around 64 times they discussed with climate change. So the climate change activities we are trying to look into, and with the WRI input from the BCAP, we have 33 action targets. That is the broad framework. And with that 33 targets, we have 7 sectors. We have, next slide. Yeah. And we have that 7 sectors. Based on the 7 sectors, we try to categorize into 33 action tracks, upon which 33 tracks were there. We have 266 action tracks. Okay, this activity, example with the expenditure of the fuel consumption. So we are trying to tag up on the action plan with the BESCOM as well as with their CREDL inputs. We are trying to look into that. How do we minimize the cost of fuels with the government vehicles? So those are the intricacies, and we are currently working upon it, and we'll definitely keep you posted in the website. Please do check out the BBMP's website for all the activities and the updates regarding the Bangalore Climate Action Plan and its working functioning. And this is with our climate action ecosystem which I was talking. We have the chairperson for the climate action cell is our special commissioner, and under which we have member secretary, chief of engineer lakes department, stakeholder departments around. We have 28 departments. And with the climate cell, climate action cell, we have the campaignings like community-led organization, identification of open wells. This mapathon, which was again recently discussed as well as looked into, and it was again need for the hour. Many of the wells have been dried up, and we are unable to find out. So in which mapathon again there is an activity that we are trying to find out those activities. And Blue Green Awards also is again highly discussed, and we have also communicated through all the newspaper and social media regarding we want to identify what are the best practices and also to acknowledge the practices, and that is with the knowledge partners, and it is on the thing, and manager will continue. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll not take more time. Can you please move to the other slides? No, the next one, please. Yeah. So we are not alone in this. So we have a huge network. We are blessed with a huge network of Friends of Climate Action Cell, so which constitutes of civil society organizations, resident welfare associations, academic institutions, and research institutions. So these are some of the collaborative partners that we have through this platform. So we engage with them regularly on a WhatsApp platform. So we would love to have all the similar minds so that we can make for a collaborative approach. So yeah, please, the next one. So yeah, so until now we have around 630 plus members on this network, from which we have received around 30 plus collaboration requests, and we have chaired around 15 plus meetings since November 2024. And yeah, the next one please. So yeah, so one more pitch in. So we have started one initiative called Blue Green Awards. So this is basically to acknowledge all the climate action and sustainability. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is to ensure we have a collaborative approach and acknowledge all the blue-green initiatives and climate approaches that both individuals, businesses, organizations have taken up. So we would, in case if you are one of them, we would encourage you to definitely apply to this. And if you know somebody who is, so do nominate them. And yeah, here's a link, so you can take a picture, or you can even write to us. So please go to the last slide. So yeah, so we are always available. Please join us. Thank you.
Thank you for telling us about the activities of the Climate Action Cell. A small token of our appreciation, I invite our editor Sahana Charan. That's Prithvi and Sharada. Yeah, now we'll throw the floor open for questions.
Thanks for that talk. Appreciate it. My name is Amit. One of the comments that we often hear is it's the marginalized and the people at the bottom of the economy who face the impact of the climate change by, let's say, top 5% of organizations and maybe the top 10% of the citizens. In all your climate action plans that you discuss, is there any conversation that is starting to at least happen? I know the world is driven by capitalist thoughts, but is there any conversation that is starting to happen that we must arrest consumerism and the worship of economic growth and SUVs and big bungalows? And so is there any conversation that is happening about changing the belief of the human society, or at least in India, about how to live in harmony with nature, at least at the top end of the society? Thanks. Kanchi, you can take the question, but please give me a good answer.
Widen the canvas, then you have to actually paint on it. No? So, no, I think there is definitely no denying, very less denying about climate change as a problem. Even in businesses, I think because of things like climate risk, all that is being spoken about. But it all lands up perpetuating some of the same structural problems. So you are creating consumerism of a certain kind. I don't think SUVs are reducing. They are coming up with new EV SUVs in the market, etc. So and this is actually, even if you see in the global climate discourses, in where all the conference of parties, etc., the kind of actors who are dominating that entire discourse. So I think in some senses what I'm saying is we have achieved the fact that businesses are in the room, but then the counterbalance of who else is in the room is not there, as a result of which the things that you're comfortable with in the business world is what also dominates the solutions. So that's why actually being able to bridge the language will become very critical. Otherwise, it is bound to reproduce some of the same kind of patterns that you've had that may have led to the climate discourse. So I don't know if I have an answer, but I think I have definitely a procedural kind of push that we have to really shift who's in the room. Yeah, and in a curated, facilitated way, because you can't just suddenly overnight change the power and balance there. Yeah.
Add to what she said, that I am part of an NGO which is working among the marginalized communities, especially in the slums. We have started discussing this because largely the climate justice question, it's linked with the social justice question. So if the marginalized communities are to be part of this, their issues also needs to be aired and discussed, because it's not a standalone issue. So the climate justice, the people who are talking about the climate justice have to take the issue of the social justice. For example, the water issue in Bangalore. So there are still slums who do not get potable water for their consumption. So when we are talking about right to water for everybody, but generally we forget to discuss how the slums get their water, access to water. So that way, I definitely feel that there is some amount of discussion that have started, but that is one-sided. That is only among the slum dwellers. Some discussion is going on. But then, if that needs to be integrated with the larger discussion, then there has to be a hand that's to be lent and they should come in. So that way, again I want to reiterate that the climate justice question is linked with the social justice question.
My question was largely on accountability of state governments and local governments to be able to. Do you think that governments are starting to become comfortable with policies and plans, especially in the absence of a legal mandate? Now, I do know this was discussed fairly, a bit, and I do appreciate that law has become part of this conversation. But maybe one other conversation that is left open is the fact that state governments are not looking at the municipal and planning legislations that maybe can also undergo a complete revamp and maybe re-envision them completely in the angle of climate change. So I also want to generally ask the question of, with the climate action plan, where do we see governments becoming more accountable, and where do we see citizens being able to question them more effectively in terms of being able to implement or not implement the plan effectively? This question is for the panel, so anybody who is free to answer this.
Both the questions are interdependent. See, the climate action plan doesn't have an independent policy on its own. It has to adapt the policy of the government. So that is not an independent analysis. So that's a major problem we have. And our own government policy is that globalization economics has been our policy, right? Which is not even debated in the parliament itself. You want that to be discussed in the climate action plan. See, the major portion is that on the discussion of the economics, on our policy, which has to happen in the assemblies and the parliament. Now, in India, we have an irony. No party supports openly capitalism. But we haven't capitalist economics in this country. Even the BJP claims it's a socialist party. They don't accept they are capitalist, right? So that's the major. At the end of the day, it's ecology versus economy. Where to address it? If you are going to address, then we have to address in the parliament and assembly, among the people's representative. That must be an electoral mandate. Unless or otherwise, this is going to be an electoral mandate. Unless or otherwise, climate change is going to be an electoral mandate. You will not have the answer for all of your questions. So that is the area we have to discuss. I agree that the state government, the municipalities, the panchayat must have definite role in deciding the action plans on combating climate change. But that are all procedural aspect. But the basic is that what is going to be our economical policies. People have to decide on that aspect. People have to decide on that aspect. This is going to be our economic policy. This is what's going to happen because of the climate change in the next 30 years. And this is going to be our policy that can be debated in the electoral level. So that's the scenario where we have to discuss. Thank you.
Founder of a progressive school located in North Bangalore. I have some of my students here with me. My question to you is this. We're talking about people and their voices in climate action and climate action committees. This one problem of climate change is a place where we as adults have lost the plot, and children deserve a voice. So where are children in schools in this discussion?
Thank you for bringing your students along. It's always a joy to have these people in the room, because really this discussion impacts their future the most, right? I mean, we are where we are. So I think two things, right? One is when we're talking about localizing climate action plans and basically involving local level communities, the youth are going to be a big part of it. We will need to make sure that youth's voice in the governance systems, in kind of informing decisions that we are making, especially with respect to a couple of things like, public open spaces. Where do we, they go for recreation? How can they imagine utilization of that space? How can we create more of these spaces? So these have social benefits, but they also have sort of climate benefits, right? So some of these conversations is where the youth voices at the local level will be very important to integrate. So that is one. The second is that, I think, even with some of the action which is happening through Climate Action Cell, through certain departments, there is a lot of attention being paid to things like municipal school grounds, and just schools in general, for three things. One is for raising awareness about, the problem and the kind of solutions that exist. The second is to implement some of these solutions. So when we're talking about blue-green infrastructure, schools have large playgrounds or they have this open spaces. How can we improve the natural, systems in those spaces? And basically, how do we create a network of these kind of blue-green systems through schools? The third is when we're talking about, these knowledge hubs. Schools, institutions can become these knowledge hubs, these centers for things like, heat. How do you tackle heat and, what kind of sort of shelters can you create? They don't need to be in a separate space. Schools and existing institutions can be those spaces which act as these knowledge hubs and then act as hubs where, some of the action can also be taken on trainings, on what the kids can do and where they can get involved. So absolutely, youth is a big part of this, and the hope is that as these things are getting localized, as these initiatives are getting rolled out, that they take an active participation and stance on this. Thank you.